Oregon's National Signing Day should have Duck fans excited about the future in Eugene. Kayvon Thibodeaux might not be the number one draft prospect after his showing at the Senior Bowl, and Oregon's men's basketball continues to strive as March Madness inches closer. All of that on today's episode of Locked On Pac-12 podcast.
You are Locked On Pac-12, your daily podcast on the Pac-12 Conference. It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of Locked On Pac-12 podcast, where we are bringing you everything you need to know about the Conference of Champions. Thanks for making this your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline is where the game starts. I'm your host, Cindy Robinson, former Pac-12 student athlete, and joining me today is Spencer McLaughlin from Locked On Ducks. Spencer, your Ducks. There's a lot to talk about, and we haven't chatted for a little bit, so got to get the Pac-12 fans up to speed with what's been going on with the Ducks, especially if they haven't been listening to Locked On Ducks, which you should be doing. Don't forget that. But let's start with National Signing Day. I know that I've heard a lot of buzz about Oregon's National Signing Day, and you and I have discussed how big National Signing Day will be for the Ducks, considering Dan Lanning. It'll be his first season. I won't say he got a full, complete season to recruit, but some of these players were recruited prior to him coming, and he just decided to still pursue them and still keep their offers available. And then there were some that I feel like he had a hand in actually, getting to commit. So for you, first thoughts about National Signing Day.
Well, I think right off the top, Bill Walton is pleased to hear you calling it the Conference of Champions. That is always the correct moniker when referring to the Pac-12. Oregon football has kind of been the only one at a championship level other than maybe Utah over the last couple of years, and recruiting is a part of that, which is why we pay attention to it. And Oregon this year had a better National Signing Day than I was prepared for, honestly. Like I kept seeing guys who were committing, and I talked on the show about a few names to watch for ahead of National Signing Day. I think I mentioned 4 total. And, I said, if Oregon can get 2 or 3 of these guys, which they should, we'll be in good shape. And then they ended up getting all of them. And I was really pleasantly surprised. And Oregon's recruiting class at one point was all the way down in like the 50s or 60s nationally. But because they got all these commits from high caliber players who could have really good careers at Oregon, it got all the way up back to the top 25, coming in right at the very edge of it, but at number 25. And I mean, anything around there, I was going to be pleased with based on, how things were looking with the number of decommitments. I think they had like over a dozen decommitments when Mario Cristobal left for Miami. That's understandable, right? I mean,
right, that's going to happen. That's natural.
Yeah, there are players who, are looking for a certain school and like, I want to go here no matter who the coach is, because I've been, maybe like you're a kid from Oregon, you grew up going to Duck games, you always wanted to go there. Or Jaleel Florence, who's one of the biggest commits in this class for the Ducks, a 4-star corner out of California. He was a guy who had committed to Oregon under the previous staff, decommitted, stayed interested, ultimately ended up choosing the Ducks with the new staff coming in, which is a testament to their ability to recruit and Oregon's presence as one of the premier brands in college football, because Florence is a guy from the San Diego area, and his teammate Jaleel Tucker is coming to Oregon this year as well, another 4-star corner. And Florence is someone who had said that Oregon was his dream school for someone who grew up in San Diego. And that's a very rare thing. It's understandable. And frankly, Oregon fans should really hope that local kids, guys like, Justin Herbert is from Oregon, grew up going to Duck games. A safety they got in this class, Trajan Williams. He's from Jefferson High School, I believe, a 4-star safety. He ended up going to the Ducks. You hope that guys like that idolize the Ducks and have wanted to go there for a long time. But when someone like Jaleel Florence, a player of his caliber from the state of California, says that, it's a testament to where the program's at. So getting commitments from Jalil Florence was huge. Dave Iuli, the offensive lineman, it might be Iuli. We're gonna
figure it out as we're gonna learn.
We're gonna learn as we go. You know, when Mariota came in, there were like 4 different ways to pronounce his name, and his mom was calling Joe Tessitore in his first game against Arkansas State back in the day, saying, "No, it's this way. You got to say it like this. You got to have a little talk, like Mario talk." But it just, you know, it'll evolve. That's just how how these things all always end up going. But Ely was a great get, and the big one, I think, was Jordan James, running back out of the state of Tennessee, who had committed to Georgia and instead flipped to Oregon. And there were a lot of crystal ball predictions about, you know, the possibility of him doing that, which is a good thing for Duck fans that he ultimately did, because we've lost a lot of running backs this offseason, 3 of them, in fact. So at some point, we just needed bodies. It looked like Derek Broussard was coming to the Ducks, and instead he went to Michigan State. Lost C.J. Verdell to the draft, lost Travis Hyde to USC, Trey Benson to the transfer portal, and now you just start to look at it in the offseason. Earlier, it was a position where you look at and say, okay, Oregon's fine a running back. They've got a bunch of running backs. And then coming into National Signing Day, it was, I sure hope we get a running back because we're kind of short on bodies right now. It was a complete reversal, but credit to Dan Lanning and the staff for making the best of the situation, really turning in a nice class with some talented players. And I'm just excited to get to see them play down in Eugene.
Yeah, as the offseason continues, we'll keep our eye on what Oregon is doing as far as filling in those spaces that have kind of become empty, like the running back space, like the defensive side. So very excited to see what Dan Lanning continues to do with that team as they prepare for the 2022 season. We're going to continue to talk to Spencer today about Kayvon Thibodeaux next. He recently played in the Senior Bowl, and there's been some speculation that his draft stock might have dropped. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football continues its march through the playoffs right to the big game in a couple weeks. Okay, we're not in football anymore, so I take that back. We'll say as basketball continues its march to the playoffs, as March Madness is just a couple weeks away. BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just football or basketball. BetOnline has you up-to-the-minute info on pro hoops, NHL, boxing, UFC, along with live real-time updates of current games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers available for the 2022 season. BetOnline is where the game starts. It's Super Week, brought to you by Get Upside, and there's no better place to get coverage of the big game than the Locked On NFL podcast. Locked On Bengals and Locked On Rams are in LA all week covering the big game. Okay, now I realize why they said that. I'm like, yeah, we are some football, but I'm thinking of college football because we're a Pac-12 school here, but the ads.
There's one more.
There's still one more.
That
is the big game.
Only one more, and then many girlfriends are going to get their boyfriends back from hibernation.
See, here's the thing. The key, ladies, is to like sports yourself, so you don't have to lose him. You guys can enjoy it together.
Easy.
That is the key.
Easy.
I'm telling you.
That I am 100% with you on that.
I mean, sometimes I'm more into it than, some of the guys I know. So that's all. I'll just say it's actually fun, ladies, especially when you know what you're talking about and you actually know what's going on. I'm a big fantasy football player. That's a good way to get into football for sure. So being a big fantasy football player, I pay attention to the draft and like what teams are getting who and who's the hottest new player. And obviously, leading up into now, I'll say, Kayvon Thibodeaux's name was the main name we heard for the possible number one candidate for the draft. Now, we're hearing a little different rumblings. And not that he's going to fall far, but there has been some speculation that he could possibly fall from that top spot down to maybe even number 5 after his showing at the Senior Bowl. I want to get your take, Spencer, mainly because we've seen some ups and downs from him this season, more due to injury than his play, but that is so something that to consider, especially going into the NFL. They want to know your health. They want to know, how sustainable you are and all of that stuff. So for you, and hearing the rumblings, what are your thoughts about Kayvon Thibodeaux going into this NFL draft?
Well, if his draft stock is legitimately falling, then some team is about to get really, really lucky. And there's a couple factors at play here. Number one, I feel obliged to say this because I think it's true. The report came out from Todd McShay at the Senior Bowl, and he was reporting what he was hearing. So as a result, I'm sure there are a lot of people who are mad at Todd McShay himself. McShay is not saying this about Thibodeaux. He's reporting what he's hearing from GMs and scouts. So don't shoot the messenger there.
Right.
The second thing is, if those GMs and scouts are coming to that conclusion and they're overthinking Kayvon Thibodeaux, let them make that mistake, because past teams have overthought Oregon prospects. I don't know what it is about the Ducks. I don't know what we did to the NFL or the scouting community writ large, but the last couple of high-profile recruits Oregon has sent into the draft that'll get taken in the top 10, people just seem to be radically overthinking. Justin Herbert is a prime example. And look, I thought he'd be good in the NFL. I didn't know he would be a top 5 caliber quarterback within a couple of years. I mean, he is sensational. But there were people saying, I don't know if he's going to be a first-round pick. I'm like, hold up. He's mobile, 6'6", huge arm, 4.2 biology student, built Oregon back from 4-8 up to winning a Rose Bowl when he walked off the field. What am I missing here? Like, yeah, he's a little bit raw, but if you don't have a coaching staff that can refine him, then guess what, organization in the NFL, you don't have the right coaching staff. So I thought that was strange. I saw Jeff Schwartz tweet that they did the same thing with Haloti Ngata years ago. They said, well, I heard Haloti Ngata doesn't practice much. And Schwartz said, dude, that's hilarious that people thought that. The reason he didn't practice was because he wrecked drills. He was too good. We couldn't block him. And now they're starting to, I think, overthink Kayvon Thibodeaux, because when you watch him play, he's been, one of the guys in the running, or for a while it seemed like he was the consensus number 1 overall pick. And I think when that happens, when he's had that sort of hype as a number 1 overall recruit coming out of high school, I think what happens is mentally we get kind of bored with it as just as people in sports. It's a really easy thing to do. But he was locked into that position for a while for a reason. And now, the report is McShay's hearing that he's, having people question his drive or his commitment or love of football or this, that, and the other thing. I'm saying, look, he's 6'5", 260. He runs like a linebacker. He can be dominant against the run, is an elite pass rusher. He blew up games single-handedly and won them for the Ducks this past season, and was always the best defensive player on the field that offensive coordinators had to scheme against or pay the price. Those were their options. Roll the pocket, double team, chip him, do something. You either do that or your left tackles are going to get absolutely destroyed. That's all that happened time and time again this year. And a guy like that, if you can't coach him to the point where he's in a scheme that allows him to thrive, then you don't have the right coaching staff. But if they're going to overthink this, and I saw this a couple of years ago or last year with Justin Fields. The fact that Justin Fields fell to, 12 to the Bears is the most mind-boggling thing in the world to me. I don't understand it at all. But because for so long it had been, Trevor Lawrence is number 1, and then right below him is Justin Fields number 2. It's going to be those two. Then we just sort of had too much time between the end of the college football season and the NFL draft itself. And what you get as a result is people overanalyzing and overthinking. Penei Sewell, another guy from Oregon, there were quote-unquote maturity concerns. And no one who'd been around the Oregon program had ever credited anything like that. No one thought that about him at all. And he goes to the Lions. He falls all the way down to 7 when he's a top 3 or 4 caliber pick. And the Lions get a foundational part of their offensive line as a result. And that's what will happen here if people buy into this stuff about Thibodeaux and say, like, I don't know if he's a top 5 pick. Well, okay, then somebody at 10 is about to get a high-level pass rusher who can do a lot of things defensively for the football team.
So the thing I'm kind of wondering if it's becoming an issue is that he's a very headstrong person that has plans beyond football already, right? Like, that's That's not something he hides, and I don't think it's anything wrong with that. But I could definitely see teams trying to find something wrong with that, because there goes the, are you really focused on football? Because for some reason, there's this mindset that football can be the only thing you're focused on to be successful in the NFL, when reality is a lot of failures happen with athletes because they're not prepared for life after football, or taking advantage of the opportunity that football provides, right? And making other things happen for themselves. And so I think maybe because of how he carries himself, because of how vocal he is, that like, I'm a brand and I'm making this and this happen for myself along with football. Like, I'm using football as a catalyst for that. Maybe some teams are turned off by that.
I mean, I think it's definitely part of it. I just think that that's a misguided way to look at it. You know, I do think that there's some athletes in the world who are too into themselves, but I don't think Kayvon Thibodeaux is that sort of guy. As someone who's watched every game he's played in college ever, he is a dominant force when he steps onto the football field. And yeah, you want your guys to be like Tom Brady, right? I've been watching Man in the Arena, which is just spectacular.
I'm glad you're tuning in.
Yeah, it's fantastic. But I mean, you know, his commitment to football is second to none. But he also has a family that he's committed to. He also, you know, marketed the TB12 methods and whatnot, and that was a business venture he went into. Like, the idea that you can't be really great if you have any outside ventures, I don't think is true. They can become a distraction, but just their mere existence doesn't mean that it's going to take away from their commitment to their sport and their profession and their drive to be great. I mean, Damian Lillard has rap albums. That hasn't impacted his play at all. Steph Curry is a scratch golfer. You know how hard it is to be a scratch golfer? You have to put in a lot of time and be good and be committed to it. And so these are other parts of these guys' lives, and just because they have them doesn't mean they aren't still highly committed. But you know, like I said, if an NFL team wants to make that mistake, they're welcome to go ahead.
Shame on them, right?
They're welcome to go ahead and do it. And it wouldn't shock me if they do, because in following the NFL the last couple of years, what I've learned is there is a shocking amount of incompetence everywhere, everywhere that you look. Don't even get me started.
That's a whole nother show.
We'll go for 20 minutes. Let's stay focused.
Yeah, that's a wrap. But we'll definitely keep our eye on how Kayvon Thibodeaux does at the combine and leading up to the draft. I feel like once they see him actually really in action, I know Senior Bowl was action, but like, see him in action, you know, doing all the combine drills, hopefully he participates in all of them, so that you know, he can showcase, but he might feel like he doesn't need to. You know how that goes. Either way, we'll see how the draft goes for Kayvon Thibodeaux. We're rooting for him, obviously, as a Pac-12 athlete. Coming up next, Spencer and I will dive into Oregon's men's basketball as they continue their road to March Madness. Built Bar, you know, it's that time of year, you guys. New Year's resolutions. We're in February now. I hope you're still holding on to them. If one of your New Year's resolutions was to lose weight, well, Built Bar is the protein bar for you that you should be incorporating in your diet, okay? Built Bar also has like new little, I guess, products, you would say. Have you tried the Puffs? If you haven't, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, they're not just a protein bar, they're a treat. And they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Puffs are a fan favorite with some incredible flavors: yummy cinnamony, wow, churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie, all of them so good. These are going to be your new favorite, I promise you. They're low in calorie, high in protein. Replace your candy bars with these. They're better. A typical candy bar can be anywhere from 200 to 300 calories. So go ahead and head to built.com and just try them. I'll say that, try them, okay? You can get 15% off your first order on Locked15. That's promo code Locked15 for 15% off at built.com. Man, some of those words are kind of hard.
Cinnamony.
Like cinnamony? Like, who made that?
Cinnamony.
Like, why?
I mean, I love cinnamon more than the next guy or gal, but cinnamony.
Yeah, that was a lot. I wasn't.
It's like in Ratatouille when Emile tells Remy, like, yeah, it's lightning-y. Like, I think that worked better than Cinnamon Me. But
see, now I want to go watch that today. I think after we get off here, I'm going to go watch Ratatouille because it's been
my favorite Pixar movie ever.
It's so good. Okay, so
I love that one.
You know, we love to watch Disney, but we also love to watch men's basketball.
Yes.
And Oregon Ducks have been on a win streak ever since the upsets against USC and UCLA. Now, here's a little something I want to talk to you about, Spencer. I was reading an article. Let me see exactly his name so I can familiarize. John Canzano. Do you know who that is?
I do know who John Canzano is.
Okay.
Yes. Oregon, every Duck fan does.
Okay, so I'm sure you guys are aware. So his recent article about the Ducks men's basketball was a positive and a question mark. So he has the question of like, how close is Oregon actually to making the UCLA bracket? And he asked someone who's considered like top bracketology guy, you know, the same question. And he said they're squarely on the bubble. UCLA's win was big, but the USC not as big as people think. And I think that was pretty shocking, more so because USC had at the time was one of the top teams, had only lost to Stanford. And so to see that may not still be enough for Oregon to make the NCAA tournament is kind of shocking to me. I want to know, do you feel like that's a valid thought, or if it's like they're being too tough on Oregon?
I think it's perfectly fair because of how Oregon started the season. And Dana Altman's squads have had slow starts before. We've talked about that on the show. And, you know, it's a pretty well-known commodity in Oregon circles that they tend to play their best basketball later in the year. And sometimes they have a couple duds. But this year was exceptionally slow. They were 6-6. That's not something that Oregon should ever be content with, and be like, well, you know, we'll bounce back. And they have, excuse me, to an extent, but it just makes it such a hard road to get there. And last I saw, Joe Lunardi, who is bracketology god, basically, he's got Oregon right now as part of the last 4 in to the tournament in a field of 68 teams.
Okay.
And what that means for Duck fans is there's not a lot of margin for error. It doesn't mean they can't lose games. They don't have to win out. They've got 9 games left. I think if they go 6-3, they should be okay. If they go 7-2, they'll definitely be okay, because that would mean they'll probably have at least 1 win against Arizona or UCLA. So they've still got Arizona, UCLA, and USC, but leading up to those 3 games, 2 of which are at home, Arizona is on the road, and that's going to be a brutal environment. I expect Oregon to lose that game because Arizona looks really good. Yeah. But leading up to that game, Oregon has got 4 games that they have to have. They really, it is a high pressure time, but if Oregon can get through their next 4 at 4-0, they should be in pretty good shape. They've got Cal, Washington State, Arizona State on the road, and there's one other game in there that I'm forgetting. And then they end the year on the road at Washington and Washington State, who are both coming on strong, and neither of those games are going to be gimmies. But if they can go 4-0 leading up to the 3 games against ranked opponents, USC, UCLA at home, and then Arizona on the road, they'll be in good shape. But the margin for error here is slim. They're sitting at 7 losses right now. If they go into the Pac-12 tournament with under 10, they will be fine to get into the tournament. Once you get in, anything can happen. But if they go in with 10 or more, that Selection Sunday is going to be a sweat.
So the thing too that I think that a lot of us as fans watching basketball tend to like not necessarily pay attention to is how the win was won. Okay. And so I think that might be a strike against Oregon when they're narrowly winning games against teams like Utah, instead of it being not a blowout, but a bigger margin, you know, versus being close to a UCLA, a USC, a Arizona. That's understandable. Those are tough teams. Those are teams that are supposed to bring you down to the wire and, you know, be a battle so I think for them, they're going to have to tighten up against teams that they're supposed to beat, because that's where things get evaluated a little tougher. They're looking like, yeah, you got the win, but it was just barely. Are you going to be this competitive how we need you to be in the tournament? And that's the part that I think a lot of us tend to just forget, because we look at the record and we don't look at the scores after it's gone. You know what I mean? After it's over, it's like, okay, whatever, you won, we got past that team. And it's like, no, how did you get past them? Where's your weaknesses? Where's things you need to tighten up on and get better at? So yeah.
So yes and no with regards to what you just said. In terms of Oregon's prospects to win the games they should win or beat high-level teams, the way that they win matters. But the difference between college football and college basketball is because the field is so much larger and it's so computer-driven that just getting the win is at the end of the day what matters. So the Utah game, for example, they were up most of the game. They were up 14 points with 5:23 to go, and then they did a UCLA-style collapse at the end, almost let it get to overtime. Utah had to look at the buzzer to send it to overtime. Thankfully, they missed. Oregon gets the win and sweeps the Mountain teams, Colorado and Utah, on the road for the first time ever, which, regardless of how much those teams are struggling this year, that's an accomplishment in and of itself. The way that Oregon has to play to beat the teams that they have to needs to look like the first half of Utah and the second half of Colorado. And really, the first half of Colorado wasn't that bad because Colorado is a decent team and you're playing on the road. It's a tough place to win. The way Oregon played in that second half was pretty dominant at the defensive end particularly. If they can do that, which has always been their calling card under Dana Altman, they will be okay and they will win the games that they should. But it just makes us nervous as Duck fans when you're up 14 with 5:20 to go. You think, oh, we're just going to cruise here. And instead, you're sweating out a shot that is in the air as the buzzer expires to send it to overtime. That's not what you would like in an ideal world. So to win the games they should win, they have to play better. But from a record and schedule quality standpoint, they do just need to get the wins however they look. But if they can just hold serve at their home court, they've got 5 home games left, and 4 of them are on the road. If they can win at home and not lose there, that would be pretty big because that means you're beating UCLA again, and getting a quad 1 win like that is really big for the resume to try to cancel out some of those bad early season losses. Though one of them to St. Mary's is not looking as bad because the Gales are now in the top 25. That should help. But Oregon definitely, and I'm sorry, cover your ears, Duck fans, needs to root for USC down the stretch here, because if we're able to beat them again, it needs to be as good of a win as possible because Oregon's just operating on the margins here. The women, less so. They had a couple losses. I think they'll be fine. They'll get into the tournament, no problem. They just won't be as high a seed as they perhaps would have hoped. You know, they were maybe going for a 4 seed or a 3 seed. Now they'll probably be down closer to 5 or 6, but that's okay. They'll be all right. Or the men, on the other hand, it is just I'm glad there's no game today as we're recording this, because every day is just like a high level of stress because, like, man, we have to have this one, you know, and the game's upcoming against winnable opponents, beatable opponents. You got to have those, and hopefully Oregon is able to play their best and get the wins. But at the end of the day, they just win, survive in advance until you get to the tournament. Hopefully.
All right. Well, Oregon actually has 6 more home games left because they have to replay a game against Washington State.
Oh, that's right.
So the next 4 games will be at home. Next one coming up is Thursday against Stanford. It has to be a winnable. It has to be a game they win. So fingers crossed for the Ducks.
If you lose a game to a Stanford or their game against Arizona State on the road, you know, to teams that are really not that good, or either the Washington schools, then what you look at is, does Oregon have to win the Pac-12 tournament to get into the big dance, which they've done before, but you'd rather not have that level of added pressure, because it's going to be hard, because the Pac-12 conference is really good, especially at the top. You know, it thins out a little, but when your top teams are UCLA and Arizona, and then you've got Oregon and USC in there, it's a tough conference to win in the tournament. But it's going to be exciting, however it all plays out.
Okay, well, Spencer, thank you so much for joining us. Per usual, we love having you on here to talk everything Ducks. Make sure you guys check out Spencer McLaughlin on Locked On Ducks on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcast. He's giving you all this great info all throughout the week, okay? Keeping you up to date on everything happening in Eugene. You guys can also follow along on Twitter at Locked On Ducks and at Smalls_55 for Spencer's personal handle. Make sure you follow Locked On Pac-12 podcast on Twitter at LO_Pac-12. Follow on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And then also on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, also, thank you for making this your first listen every day. Coming up this week, we'll be talking to the newest host of Locked On Utes, Sammy Mora, and some more Arizona Sun Devil stuff, and et cetera, et cetera. Now go ahead and make your second listen Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Locked On Bets is hosted by your boy Q with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Other than that, make sure you guys continue to stay locked on Pac-12 on the Locked On Network.